My world shattered. My brain just short-circuited, staring at the creature in front of me with cat ears, a swishing tail, and a tiny, questioning meow. This was Cole, my best friend, the same guy I shotgunned beers and argued about fantasy football with. And now I had to be careful. Our life together was a complete disaster zone. Cat hair everywhere, a mountain of empty tuna cans, and on top of it all, I had to teach him how to be a girl. What the hell was my life? But then I'd look into those mismatched, shimmering cat eyes, one amber, one blue, so full of dependence, and my heart would just melt into a stupid, thumping puddle. I'll never forget that Saturday morning. The sunlight was almost aggressively cheerful, slicing through a gap in the blinds and carving a bright rectangle on the hardwood floor. Yawning, I stumbled into the living room and almost ate it. I looked down. It was the band t-shirt and jeans Cole wore yesterday, tossed in a heap on the floor. "Cole, you slob, pick up your damn clothes." I grumbled, bending over to grab them, but something felt off. Sure, the guy was a mess, but leaving his clothes in the middle of the living room, that wasn't his style. Plus, the apartment was dead silent. Usually, his snoring was loud enough to rattle the windows, and I'd have to resist the urge to kick him awake. I picked up his clothes, straightened up, and froze. There, curled up in the corner of the sofa, was a lump. Fuzzy, a warm golden brown, and rising and falling with soft breaths. I blinked, thinking I was still dreaming. I crept closer, and my heart hammered against my ribs. Was that a person? They were small, curled into a tight ball under a thin throw blanket. But sticking out from under the blanket was the distinct, furry tip of a golden brown tail, twitching gently in its sleep. And peeking out from the edge of the blanket were two matching, triangular little cat ears, which gave a sudden, alert flick. The clothes in my hand dropped to the floor with a soft thud. The sound must have startled the unidentified creature. Why was my first instinct she? Stir, then slowly, drowsily, sat up. The blanket slid off her shoulders. I sucked in a breath, and my brain blue-screened. Sitting there was a girl. She had a small, delicate face, skin so pale it practically glowed, and features so perfect she didn't look real. Her eyes, hazy with sleep, were the most striking part. One was the color of clear amber, the other a deep ocean blue. But that wasn't the most shocking thing. The cat ears on her head were real. They swiveled slightly as she moved, and the long, golden-brown tail behind her swayed slowly, questioningly, in my direction. My jaw went slack. I stared, completely stunned. This girl, her face, why did it look so familiar? The shape of her eyes, the line of her nose. Holy shit! A completely insane thought slammed into my brain, and I couldn't stop myself from yelling. "Cole! Is that you, Cole?" The cat-eared girl flinched at my shout. Her ears flattened against her head, and her tail puffed up. She looked at me, bewildered, and opened her mouth. But what came out wasn't a rough, masculine voice I knew. It was a soft, confused meow. My world tilted on its axis. My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the floor, staring with wide, unblinking eyes at the bizarre creature my best friend had become. My reaction seemed to scare her. She shrank back, her mismatched eyes filled with a little fear and a lot more confusion. She tried again, carefully, tentatively. "Moreau, that's it. I was done." The universe had officially broken. My best friend, Cole, the 6'1" guy who could carry a 5-gallon water jug up 10 flights of stairs. The guy who shared this crappy apartment with me, while we debated whether to get wings or pizza for dinner, my completely, unapologetically dude-bro best friend, had turned into a Catgirl. The chaos lasted for a solid half-hour. I sat on the floor, trying to find a scientific explanation. Maybe I was still asleep. Maybe the beer we drank last night was tainted. Meanwhile, the Catgirl version of Cole cautiously climbed off the couch, a little clumsily on all fours, padded over to me, and rubbed her fuzzy head against my arm. Mio, the touch was real warm. The purring sound vibrated from her throat. It shattered any lingering hope that this was just a dream. It was real. With a trembling hand, I reached out and touched her ear. The fur was incredibly soft, and the ear twitched at my touch, a real, physiological reaction. She seemed to like it, pressing her head into my palm, her purring growing louder. Are you really Cole?" My voice was thin and reedy. She tilted her head, looking at me with those impossibly out-of-place eyes, her expression clear and innocent. She obviously didn't understand the question. Great. It looked like his IQ took a hit, too. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. I had to figure this out. I pointed to myself. Leo. I'm Leo. Then I pointed at her. You. Cole. Do you remember? She blinked, then suddenly lifted a small hand, mimicking my gesture. She pointed at me, a garbled sound forming in her throat. Lee. Oh. My heart skipped a beat. Progress. Yes. Leo. I quickly pointed back at her. And you. She looked down at her own hand, thinking hard. She looked up at me, a little lost, and said quietly, uncertainly, Cole. It was slurred, but it was definitely Cole. I almost cried with relief. I grabbed her by the shoulders. Her frame was so delicate. I was afraid to squeeze too hard. Yes. Cole, you're Cole. My excitement seemed to confuse her, but seeing me happy made her break into a goofy smile, the tip of her tail wagging with pleasure. Okay, at least he knew his own name. But any further communication was a dead end. When I asked her how this happened, she just stared at me blankly or answered with a soft meow. When I asked if she felt sick, she seemed to understand a little. She took my hand and placed it on her flat little stomach, looking up at me pitifully. Hungry? All right, one problem at a time. I helped her. It felt wrong to call this person bro, to her feet and led her to the bathroom. Her walk was awkward, like she wasn't used to standing on two legs. She wobbled a little, her tail instinctively helping her balance. I squeezed toothpaste onto a brush and tried to teach her how to use it. Her first instinct was to sniff it, then try to lick the paste off. I quickly intervened, showing her how to brush like I was teaching a toddler. She was a fast learner, though, even if she got foam all over her mouth. She stared at her reflection, fascinated, reaching out to touch the mirror and then her own ears, as if confused by the cat-eared person staring back. Washing her face was even harder. She was afraid of the water. When I tried to use a warm washcloth, she dodged and ducked, making little unhappy mew sounds like an annoyed kitten, until I finally held her still. After she was cleaned up, it was time for breakfast. I opened the fridge, pulled out eggs and bacon, and she followed me like a shadow, her tail almost brushing against my legs, curious about everything. As I fried the eggs, she stood beside me, her eyes glued to the sizzling pan, her nose twitching, a low purr rumbling in her chest. The sight was so funny and adorable, it almost reminded me of the old Cole waiting for me to finish cooking. I served the eggs and bacon on a plate and set it on the table. I gave her a fork, but she clearly had no idea how to use it, clumsily poking at the food until she almost sent an egg flying. Finally, she gave up, looked at me with those big, watery eyes, and reached for the plate with her bare hands. Hey, don't. I stopped her just in time. I'd forgotten she was probably more used to natural eating methods now. Resigned, I picked up her fork, speared a piece of egg, blew on it, and held it to her mouth. She leaned in, took a bite, and chewed thoughtfully. Her eyes lit up, and her tail shot straight up, wagging back and forth. Clearly, she approved. Mro, she urged, demanding another bite. And so, I fed her breakfast, one bite at a time. Watching her eat so happily, the feeling of panic and absurdity in my chest was strangely replaced by something soft and warm. Whatever happened, Cole was still Cole. The packaging was different, but the core software was mostly the same. At least his bottomless appetite hadn't changed a bit. After breakfast came the next problem, clothes. She couldn't keep wearing my huge, old t-shirt, which, while covering the important parts, left her completely bare underneath. I rummaged through my drawers and found my baggiest pair of sweatpants and a new, clean white t-shirt. Here, put these on. I handed them to her. She took them, turned them over curiously, and then tried to bite them. Not like that. My head was starting to ache. Here, let me show you. Like a patient father, I guided her arms through the sleeves and her head through the collar. The pants were even harder. Her balance was terrible, and she wobbled trying to stand on one leg. I had to hold her steady. Our hands brushed, and when I touched her smooth skin, I flinched back like I'd been burned, my face growing hot. She, on the other hand, was completely unbothered. Finally, she was dressed. The clothes were huge on her, but at least she looked decent. if you ignored the constantly twitching cat ears and the restless tail. Okay, I said, breathing a sigh of relief. Now, we need to have a serious talk about what the hell is going on. I led her to the couch and pulled out my phone, scrolling to our text history from yesterday and a photo of us. In the picture, he was still the same loudmouthed, cocky guy with his arms slung around my neck. I pointed to the screen. Look, this was you yesterday, remember? She leaned in close, her mismatched eyes studying the picture, her brow furrowed in concentration. After a moment, she looked up confused. She tapped the photo of Cole, then pointed to herself. Cole, right, that's you. I swiped to the next picture, one we took at the dive bar last night, the table littered with beer bottles and chicken wing bones. Last night, we went here, ate wings, had some beers. Remember? She stared at the picture, her nose twitching as if she could smell the food. Suddenly, she pointed a finger at a basket of fish and chips in the photo, then looked at me, her eyes sparkling. Fish. Yummy. Yes, the fish was yummy. I felt my energy draining. That's not the point. The point is, what happened after? How do we get home? She tried hard to remember, her tail tapping restlessly against the couch cushions. Dark. Scary, she said in broken fragments, gesturing with her hands. Bright. Bang. Hurt. Then. Sleepy. Dark. Scary. A bright light. Something hit her. It hurt. Then she fell asleep. I tried to piece it together. We were pretty buzzed last night, but not blackout drunk. I remember us walking home, taking a shortcut through that old, run-down city park we usually avoided. I think there was a flash of bright light from the sky, like a meteor or maybe just a plane, and then Cole tripped and fell. I just laughed at him, told him he couldn't handle his beer. He cussed me out and got back up, said he was fine. We stumbled the rest of the way home. Could have been the light, or the fall. That sounds like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. I ran my hands through my hair, totally lost. The most immediate problem was what to do now. Call the cops, tell them my best friend mutated? They'd send me straight to a psych ward. Take him to a hospital. What department would I even ask for? Interspecies transformation? I was starting to panic, pulling at my hair. Beside me, Cole seemed to sense my anxiety. She shifted uneasily. Leo. Sad. I looked at her worried, dependent little face, and my heart melted all over again. No, it's okay, I sighed, ruffling her hair, avoiding the ears. Not sad. We'll figure it out. The first priority was to take care of her, and that meant buying her proper clothes. And women's underwear. The thought made my skin crawl, but I couldn't let her go commando on my t-shirts forever. Second, food. Should I buy cat food? Or human food? Maybe a mix of both? And she definitely couldn't go outside like this. People would freak out. I'd have to call in sick to work to look after her. I quickly sent a text to my manager, lying about a sudden, violent case of food poisoning. He replied instantly, telling me to rest up. Work handled, I turned to Cole, who was now batting at a couch cushion with her tail. Cole, I have to go out and buy you some things. You stay here and be good, okay? Her head snapped up, ears perked, tail frozen. Her eyes filled with panic. No. She lunged forward and grabbed my arm. Together. Scary. Her grip was surprisingly strong, and her eyes were wide with a primal fear, like I was about to abandon her. The apartment is safe. I'll be back really fast. I tried to soothe her. No, she insisted, shaking her head, a film of tears forming in her mismatched eyes. Together, Leo, together. Seeing her on the verge of tears, I caved. I couldn't leave her alone. What if she messed with the stove? What if she got scared and ran outside, but taking her out? I looked at the very obvious cat ears and the impossible-to-hide tail. How could I possibly take her out in public? I was stuck. Then, an idea hit me. I dug through my closet and found a thick, hooded sweatshirt from winter along with a big scarf. You can come, but you have to wear this. Hide your ears in the hood and your tail. Try to keep it still, tucked in, okay? She nodded eagerly, willing to do anything as long as she wasn't left alone. I helped her into the heavy hoodie, pulled the hood up tight, and wrapped the scarf around her neck and face, leaving only her eyes visible. I checked our reflection. She looked like someone with a really bad cold, maybe a little weird for the season, but it was better than the alternative. The tail was hidden under the baggy sweats and the long hem of the hoodie. As long as she didn't swish it around, we might be okay. Let's go. And remember, keep your head down and don't make a sound. I warned. She nodded nervously, her small hand clutching the hem of my shirt. I took a deep breath and, for the first time, walked out the door with my best friend, the Catgirl. There weren't many people in our apartment complex. When we passed a neighbor, I just ducked my head and mumbled a hello, walking quickly. Cole, or maybe I should call her Callie now, stuck close to me, her body tense, her hand trembling where it gripped my shirt. But she was being good, keeping her head down and staying silent. Thankfully, the target wasn't far. The second we walked in, the blast of air conditioning made her squirm. It must have been hot under all those layers. I quickly steered her to a less crowded aisle and loosened her scarf, but I didn't dare take off the hood. Hot, she mumbled, her voice muffled by the fabric. Just hang in there, we'll be quick. I grabbed a shopping cart, giving her something to hold onto so she'd look more natural. The rows of colorful products immediately captured her attention. Her mismatched eyes darted around, wide with curiosity. When we passed the fresh seafood counter, with its tanks of live lobsters and fish, she froze, completely mesmerized. Her ears twitched inside her hood, and I could feel her tail thumping against the back of her legs. "Fish, alive," she whispered excitedly, tugging on my sleeve. "Yeah, alive, but we're not getting any. I don't know how to cook them," I said, pulling her away. Her attention quickly shifted to the snack aisle, specifically the shelves loaded with beef jerky and fish crackers. She just stood there, staring, a low purr starting in her throat as she looked up at me with pleading eyes. "Want?" I couldn't say no. I tossed a few bags of jerky and goldfish into the cart. She beamed, and I saw her tail give a happy little swish under her hoodie. Next up was the main event, the women's lingerie section. I pushed the cart toward the endless racks of colorful bras and underwear, my face burning, my feet feeling like they were glued to the floor. A friendly sales associate immediately approached. "Picking something out for your girlfriend, hon?" I nodded stiffly. Yeah. Do you know her size?" "How the hell would I know that?" I instinctively glanced at Callie, who was hiding behind me. The employee followed my gaze and smiled. "Oh, don't be shy. Sweetie, why don't you come take a look? See what style you like? We can get you fitted." Callie shrank further behind me, terrified. My toes were curling in my shoes from the awkwardness. I just pointed at a few of the plainest-looking styles and took a wild guess at the size. "These are fine." The woman gave me an all-knowing look and grabbed the size I asked for. "This is one of our best sellers, super comfy. Need some matching panties?" "Yes, please, all of it." I just wanted the public execution to be over. I hastily grabbed a pack of plain cotton underwear and practically fled the section. Callie looked up at me, sensing my distress, her expression full of confusion. I added a few sets of simple, girlish pajamas and some soft socks to the cart. Finally, we went to the pet aisle, where I grabbed a few bags of well-reviewed cat food, some canned tuna, and a handful of those squeezable cat treats. I also snagged a scratching post, better that than my couch. At checkout, the cashier gave our bizarre assortment of items: women's underwear, cat food, beef jerky. A strange look, but didn't say anything. I swiped my card, trying to look as nonchalant as possible, grabbed our bags, and hurried Callie, now fully bundled up again, out of the store. The second we were back inside the apartment, we both let out a sigh of relief. I was relieved the awkward, nerve-wracking shopping trip was over. She was relieved to be free of her suffocating disguise. She immediately tore off the scarf and hood, revealing a flushed little face and ears that could finally twitch freely. She shook her head, sending her hair flying, and let her tail out from under her sweats, swishing it back and forth happily. "Hot. Itchy," she complained, tugging at the thick hoodie. I helped her take it off. Underneath, she was just wearing my old t-shirt, the collar now stretched out, revealing a patch of pale, smooth collarbone. I quickly looked away. Don't be a creep, Leo. Even if his body had changed, that was still my best friend. It felt weird. I took out the new pajamas and underwear, pulled off the tags, and handed them to her. "These are for you. You need to wear them, okay?" She picked up the pajamas with the little strawberry print, touching the soft fabric and sniffing them curiously. "Wear them," I repeated, then, with some difficulty, pointed to the package of bras. "And you have to wear this, too." I had zero courage to teach her how to put on a bra. I just shoved the items into her hands and pointed her toward the bathroom. She was in there for a long time. I was starting to worry she'd gotten tangled up in something. Finally, the door opened. She came out in the strawberry pajamas. They were a little big, but they looked cute on her. But the bra was clearly on wrong. The straps were twisted, and the whole thing sat at a weird angle. Whatever. A problem for another day. For now, this was fine. I opened a bag of beef jerky and handed her a piece. She took it happily and nibbled on it with both hands, like a squirrel. Her tail curled contentedly. Watching her, I felt a strange mix of emotions. It was bizarre, surreal, but also weirdly therapeutic, like having a pet. I put the scratching post in the corner of the living room, and she was immediately drawn to it. She went over and tentatively scratched it with her nails. The scritch-scratch sound seemed to please her immensely. That afternoon, I tried to teach her more complex things like how to use the TV remote to watch cartoons. She was a quick study. She didn't really follow the plots, but she loved the bright colors and sounds. She curled up on the couch, hugging a pillow, completely absorbed, her tail thumping softly against the cushions. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the golden brown highlights in her hair and the soft fuzz on her ears, making her glow. For a moment, it felt almost peaceful, normal, even if you ignore the fact that she used to be my best friend. That night, I made her some ramen with an egg and sausage. She ate it happily, but was also intensely curious about the canned cat food I bought. I opened one for her to try. She took one bite, and her eyes went wide. She clearly preferred it, pushing the ramen aside to focus on the can of tuna. Okay, so a hybrid diet of human food and cat food it is. Sleeping became the next big issue. My apartment only has one bedroom, one bed. In the past, when Cole crashed here, he'd take the floor, or we'd just share the bed. Two guys, who cares? But now, I looked at her, freshly showered, wearing strawberry pajamas, sitting on the edge of my bed with her tail curled around her feet. I couldn't bring myself to say, "Let's sleep together." I grabbed my pillow and a blanket, ready to head for the couch. "Leo," she saw me leaving and patted the empty space beside her. "Sleep. Here." "Nope, nope," I said, shaking my head. "I'm good on the couch." She looked crestfallen, her ears drooping. "Scared of dark. Together. I'll leave a light on in here. You'll be fine," I said, hardening my heart and escaping to the living room. In the middle of the night, deep in sleep, I felt something warm, soft, and smelling faintly of vanilla burrow into my side. I woke with a start and looked down. Callie had snuck out of the bedroom at some point. Now she was curled up against my chest like a kitten, her head pillowed on my arm, fast asleep and purring softly. I could feel the velvety touch of her cat ears against my skin, and her tail was wrapped loosely around my leg. I went completely still, not daring to move. My heart was pounding. This was way too much. I gently tried to nudge her away, but she just grumbled in her sleep and snuggled in deeper, her hand unconsciously grabbing the front of my shirt. Her warm breath tickled my neck. I looked at her unguarded sleeping face. Her long eyelashes fanned out against her cheeks, her lips slightly parted. She looked so innocent. In the end, I sighed, pulled the blanket up over her, and gave up on moving her. Whatever. She was so fragile right now, so needy. I listened to her soft purring, smelled the sweet scent of her hair, and slowly, surprisingly, drifted back to sleep. The next few days settled into a routine. I was part dad, part mom, and full-time zookeeper. My sick days ran out, and I had to go back to work, but I was terrified to leave her alone. I taught her how to use my old phone Call Me and how to work the deadbolt, repeating over and over that she was not to open the door for anyone, ever. Every day at the office was torture. I texted her every couple of hours to check in. She learned fast and could already send simple texts like, "Hungry, miss you," and "watching TV." She also sent me a constant stream of bizarre photos, a half-eaten piece of jerky, a bird on the balcony, or just the tip of her own tail. The second I got off work, I'd race home. And every time I opened the door, she'd be there waiting, pouncing at the door to greet me, her tail wagging furiously as she helped me with my shoes. The apartment was always a mess, cushions on the floor, bits of cardboard from the scratching post everywhere, the occasional spilled glass of water. But when I'd start cleaning, she'd follow me around, trying to help in her clumsy way, looking so guilty that I could never get mad. I tried to teach her simple chores like wiping the table. She was very earnest, even if she usually got distracted by her own tail or a dust bunny. At night, we'd watch TV together. Her favorite was Planet Earth, especially the episodes about big cats. She gets so excited, pointing at the screen and meowing. On clear nights, when no one was around, I'd take her for a walk in the small park behind our building. She always held my hand tightly, curious about everything, but also jumpy, ready to hide behind me at the slightest noise. She grew more and more dependent on me, more and more like a domesticated cat, and my feelings for her were getting more and more complicated. Taking care of her had become a habit. Watching her happily devour a can of tuna, watching her nap in a patch of sunlight, watching her stumble through learning how to be human. This soft spot in my heart just kept growing. Sometimes she'd do something unconsciously affectionate, like rubbing her head against my hand or just staring at me with those big, pleading eyes, and my heart would just skip a beat. I kept telling myself, this is Cole. This is your best friend. But when you're faced with a tiny, soft cat girl who depends on you for everything, the lines of friendship start to get really, really blurry. Until that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from her number. It was 2 words. Help me. My blood ran cold. I dropped everything, mumbled an emergency to my boss, and sprinted out of the office. My heart pounded the whole way home, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Did someone find her? Did someone break in? Was she hurt? I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking too much to get the key in the lock. Finally, the door swung open. The living room was empty, a little messy, but no signs of struggle. Callie? Cole. My voice trembled. A tiny sound came from the bedroom. I burst in and found her huddled in the corner of the bed, wrapped tightly in the comforter, shaking. What happened? I rushed to her side, afraid to touch her. She slowly lifted her head from the blankets. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror and swimming with tears. She raised a trembling hand and pointed to the window. Bird. Big bird. Mean. Looked at me. I went to the window. There were a few unfamiliar feathers on the outside sill, maybe from a hawk or a falcon. The window was closed, but the blinds were partly open. A big bird must have been perched there, seen her, and maybe even tried to attack the glass. It must have terrified her. A cat's fear of large birds of prey is instinctual. I let out a breath of relief. It wasn't the worst-case scenario, but seeing her so scared made my heart ache. I quickly shut the blinds and went back to the bed, gently wrapping my arms around her. It's okay, it's okay. The bird is gone. You're safe. She trembled in my arms, her small hands gripping my shirt as she buried her face in my chest, letting out tiny, suppressed whimpers like a frightened animal. Scared. Leo. Scared. I know, but I'm here now. I'm home. I whispered over and over, stroking her back and her hair, trying to calm her. Her ears were pressed flat against her scalp, and her tail was wrapped tightly around my wrist. It took a long time for her shaking to finally subside, but she still wouldn't let go of me, just clung to me, her breathing punctuated by soft, hiccuping sobs. I held her, feeling how small and fragile she was, and something inside me just broke. The next morning, I was dreaming I was snuggling a very warm, very purry cat. It nuzzled against my chin, and I instinctively tightened my arm around it. Then it shifted, and a pair of lips, soft and tentative, pressed against my jawline. Wait, lips? My eyes flew open. Callie was awake, nestled in my arms, looking up at me, and she was nuzzling my chin. Her mismatched eyes were wide and unfocused, still hazy with sleep, but filled with a soft, trusting affection that made my stomach do a backflip. My arm was wrapped around her tiny waist, her head was on my chest, and her tail was curled around my leg. It was the most intimate, most peaceful, and most profoundly messed up moment of my entire life. She blinked slowly, then a sleepy, happy purr rumbled in her chest. Leo, she murmured, her voice husky, and leaned in to snuggle closer. And then, in a flash, her eyes snapped into focus. The sleepy haze vanished, replaced by a dawning horror, then confusion, then pure, undiluted rage. Cole! I stared down into a pair of fully conscious, blazing, and utterly mortified mismatched eyes. The look in them was no longer the innocent, dependent gaze of the past few days. It was the sharp, intelligent, and familiar glare of my best friend, Cole. Except right now, it was boiling with an emotion so complex and intense it was about to explode. You, you remember everything. My voice came out as a dry croak, my heart hammering against my ribs. Yes, it was he now, shoved himself out of my arms. The movement was clumsy, uncoordinated, but his eyes were like daggers. He looked down at the ridiculous strawberry pajamas he was wearing, and his face cycled through shades of green and white before settling on a furious, blotchy red. Leo. He practically spat my name, his voice raw with disbelief and fury. What the fuck? What the fuck have you been doing to me? He ripped the stupid cat ear headband dyed bottom off his head. The real ears were too sensitive to touch, and I thought it would help him get used to them, and threw it on the floor. He then tried to grab the tail behind him, realized it was attached, and let out a pained hiss, his expression twisting into something even more tortured. I didn't. It wasn't. You were like that. I had to take care of you. I stammered, my brain a chaotic mess. Take care of me, he seethed, his tail puffed to twice its normal size. He pointed a trembling finger at the cat toys and the half-eaten bag of jerky on the nightstand. Is this what you call taking care of me? You treated me like a pet. You put me in these clothes. You. He clearly remembered snuggling against my chin, and a wave of shame so profound washed over him that he couldn't even finish the sentence. It was an accident. You were basically a kitten. I didn't know what else to do. I argued, feeling my own face flush with heat. Shut up, he roared, lunging forward and grabbing the collar of my shirt. His strength was returning, and his eyes were murderous. He looked like he was about to knock my teeth out. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact. Honestly, I deserved it. Any guy in a situation would have done the same. But the punch never came. I hesitantly opened my eyes. His face was inches from mine, his expression a twisted mask of conflict. The fire in his eyes was still there, but underneath it, something else was churning, something dark and confusing that I couldn't name. His breathing was ragged, puffing hot against my face. The hand gripping my shirt was trembling. I should kill you, he growled, but his eyes, against his will, flickered down to my lips. The atmosphere in the room warped, becoming tight and strangely charged. I watched the war on his face, my own panic mixing with a bizarre, unwelcome flicker of anticipation. Anticipation for what? He's Cole, my brother. I tried to push him away. Cole, calm down, we can. My words were cut off as he crashed his mouth against mine. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was an explosion, a desperate, angry collision, all teeth and pressure a punishment. It was clumsy and savage, and sent a jolt through me that made my scalp tingle. My mind went completely blank. All I knew was the hot, soft, punishing press of his lips and the sound of his ragged, frantic breathing. It felt like he was trying to prove something, or maybe destroy something, with that single, violent act. I was frozen, too stunned to fight back, too shocked to respond. After a few seconds that stretched into an eternity, he ripped himself away as if he'd been burned. He stumbled back, panting heavily, staring at me, and at his own mouth, with utter disbelief. His face was crimson, but the tips of his real ears had gone pale. His tail was ramrod straight. Fuck, he choked out, the word thick with self-loathing and confusion. I wasn't doing much better. My lips throbbed, my heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest, and my face was on fire. We stood there like idiots, a few feet of charged air separating us, thick with shame, fury, and a fragile, terrifying intimacy. He was the first to break. His eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. He spun around and practically tripped over his own feet as he bolted for the bathroom, slamming the door behind him with a deafening bang. The sound shocked me back to reality. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the edge of the bed. I lifted a hand to my stinging lips. I could still feel his heat, his taste. Did Cole just kiss me? My best friend, who turned into a Catgirl, just regained his memory and was so angry he wanted to kill me. Just forcibly kissed me. What the hell was my life? I could hear the frantic sound of water splashing in the bathroom, like he was trying to wash the memory off his face. I sat there, my mind a swirling vortex of embarrassment, shame, a secret thrill, and above all, a huge, overwhelming panic. He had his memory back. That should be a good thing, right? But what now? What happens to us in that kiss? What the hell was that? The water shut off. The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at the door, my stomach twisting into knots, dreading what would come next. More rage, a final, complete break of our friendship, or something else. The doorknob turned. My heart leaped into my throat. The door opened. Cole stood in the doorway, his hair soaked and dripping, water beads clinging to his face. I couldn't tell if it was from the sink or from tears. The defiant anger in his mismatched eyes was gone, replaced by a storm of warring emotions. Humiliation, desperation, and a kind of reckless surrender. He wouldn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on a corner of the room. His voice was muffled, thick with emotion, but stubbornly firm. Lau. Yeah. My heart was going to explode. You saw. You touched. You fed me. And you kissed me. With every word, his ears turned a shade redder, his tail thumping agitatedly against the floor. You have to take responsibility. My brain stalled, then crashed. Take responsibility? Hearing those words come out of the mouth of the newly restored Cole was like getting hit by a truck. Whoa, hold on, Cole, listen. That kiss was an accident. You were the one who... I wanted to explain that he had been the aggressor, that I was the victim, though maybe not a completely unwilling one. But he cut me off. I don't care, he snapped, his voice rising like a cornered cat's. He whipped his head around to glare at me, his eyes still red-rimmed. I'm only like this because of you. I was floored. Because of me? If I hadn't gone out for wings with you, if we hadn't taken that stupid shortcut, I never would have been hit by that thing and turned into... This, he yelled, his tail standing on end. This is all your fault. The logic was insane, but when I thought about it, could I really argue? I opened my mouth, but before I could say anything, he let out a low groan and swayed, grabbing the doorframe for support. What's wrong? I started to get up. Don't come near me, he snarled, but his breathing was becoming shallow and rapid. An unnatural flush was spreading across his cheeks, and his eyes started to lose focus. The fierce anger he'd been projecting was fading, replaced by a familiar, cat-like haze. He shook his head, trying to fight it, but it was no use. An involuntary, soft sound escaped his throat. Mio. The sound made him freeze, a look of utter humiliation and defeat on his face. Damn it, it's happening again. He cursed, his body slumping against the doorframe. I ignored his warning and rushed over to catch him as he slid to the floor. His skin was burning hot. You have a fever, I said, alarmed. He leaned against me, his eyes glassy. He tried to push me away, but his arms had no strength. Instead, his nose instinctively brushed against my neck, and he let out a soft, contented purr. A second later, he seemed to realize what he was doing and tensed up. Get off. I'm not. But another mew slipped out before he could finish. He gave up completely, burying his hot face in my shoulder, refusing to look at me. But his tail, acting on its own, curled around my wrist and held on tight. It seemed his memory and personality were still unstable. I sighed, half carrying, half guiding him back to the bed. He crawled under the covers and turned his back to me, but his ears stood at attention, tracking my every move. I'll go get you some medicine and a cold cloth. As I turned to leave, I felt a tug on my shirt. I looked back. He had reached out from under the blanket and was weakly holding onto the hem, stopping me. Don't go, he mumbled. It was a command laced with a plea. You're burning up. You need medicine. Bro, he replied pitifully. My heart felt like it was being tickled by a feather. It melted. I sat back down on the bed. Okay, I won't go. Just let go for a second so I can get the medicine. I'll be right back. He hesitated, then slowly released his grip. I ran to get fever reducers, water, and a washcloth. He was cooperative when I helped him sit up and take the pills, his eyes never leaving my face. The moment he was done, he burrowed back under the covers, pulling them over his head until only his drooping, miserable ears were visible. I held the damp cloth, feeling helpless. Let me wipe your face. It'll help you cool down. The lump under the covers shifted, and a hand emerged, blindly swatting at the cloth before retreating back into the cocoon. He was clearly too embarrassed and proud to accept my help. I sighed and gently dabbed the cool cloth on the back of his neck and behind his ears, the only parts of him that were exposed. He stiffened but didn't pull away. After a few minutes, his breathing evened out, and I thought he'd fallen asleep. I started to pull the cloth away. Suddenly, the blanket was thrown back. He shot up, wrapped his arms around my neck, and pulled me down. I was caught completely off guard, falling forward onto the bed. I managed to catch myself with my hands, stopping just short of crushing him. Our faces were inches apart, our noses almost touching. He looked up at me, his mismatched eyes shimmering with fever and a wild, reckless determination. Responsibility, he whispered, his voice soft and raspy, scraping against my heart. Starts now. Then he tilted his head up and kissed me again. This time, there was no anger. It was clumsy and searching, hot and soft, and tasted faintly of sweet medicine. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to push him away. This is Cole. He's sick. He doesn't know what he's doing. But my hands seemed to have a mind of their own. They moved, slowly, to wrap around his waist. He let out a soft shudder against me, then pressed himself closer, a contented purr rumbling deep in his chest. The kiss stretched on, long and messy, until we were both breathless. He pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against mine, our hot, ragged breaths mingling in the small space between us. His eyes were glazed over, his cheeks flushed. "Don't you dare. Back out," he mumbled. Then, as if he'd used up every last bit of his energy, his head lolled to the side, and he fell asleep against my shoulder, his tail still wrapped possessively around my arm. I held his feverish body, listening to his breathing even out into a soft purr. My heart felt like a puddle of warm water. Well, I was in it now. No turning back. Responsibility, huh? I leaned down and gently, tenderly kissed the tip of his hot, fuzzy cat ear. "Okay," I whispered. "I won't."